When we're young, we have an amazing, positive outlook about how great life is going to be, but somewhere along the line, we forget to dream and end up settling. Join Up Dots features amazing people who refuse to give up and chose to go after their dreams. This is your blueprint for greatness. So here's your host, live from the back of his garden in the UK, David Ralph.
Good morning, everybody out there in internet land. All my happy listeners, welcome to another show. It's episode 26 today, and we've got quite a different vibe on this show because the last few shows that we've had are people that, to be honest, are a little bit more mature than the guy that we've got today. He's 23, but he's a mover and a shaker, a zigger and a zagger with the best of them. And you'll hear in today's conversation that he's really setting the world alight at quite a young age. He's the head of growth and business development at Gumroad, where he focuses on building the company into the easiest and most popular way for creators to sell what they make. Now, if you haven't heard of Gumroad, this is the place where creative folks such as musicians, filmmakers and artists can sell their work directly to their eager audience using cutting-edge e-commerce tools, so cutting out the middleman and retaining greater control over their work. So in effect, make an album and put it straight into the waiting arms of your fans. So imagine our guest must be having some great gossipy meetings with the rich and famous of the world. I think I might try and ask a few questions on that. But his entrepreneurial journey didn't start in Hollywood or Silicon Valley. Instead, it was in Africa, strangely enough, that the bug to develop and assist in startups really hit home. And once he had the vision of his future, he set out on a path that has led him to join Up Dots with me today. So where does he get his inspiration now he is moving and shaking with the best of them? What does he do when he isn't building Gumroad into a major force to be reckoned with? Well, let's find out as we invite the amazing Ryan Delk to the show. How are you today, Ryan?
I'm doing well. Thanks so much for having me, David.
No, it's an absolute delight to have you here. I hope it didn't sound rude by mentioning your age right at the forefront, but you really have packed a lot in, haven't you? You're 23 years old. I didn't even begin to consider that I needed to get going at the age of 23, and here you are already, you know, with a career path setting the world alight.
Well, thanks. I appreciate that. I mean, I've been fortunate to have a lot of people invest in me and teach me a lot of lessons along the way. So consider myself very fortunate.
But people only invest in people that are worth investing in. So you must have really been moving and shaking from an early age. Can you remember, were you the kind of kid that was always looking for an angle, mowing lawns, washing cars and sort of knocking on people's doors to earn a few shekels here and there?
Yeah, that was that pretty much sums it up, actually. Yeah, I had the first real thing I did was a lawn service, but I did a lot of things before that and after that at varied degrees of silliness in retrospect, but always trying to find, you know, ways to really try to just like create value for people in exchange for, you know, them paying me money, sort of is what it boils down to. So
how do you create value with a lawn service other than cutting the grass? Well, what makes a good lawn service man or boy? How old were you when you were doing that?
I think I was, when it first started, I think I was maybe 14 or something. And just, I remember seeing I think I saw like a sort of bigger lawn company cutting my neighbor's yard. And I don't remember or maybe it was like my grandparents' yard. And I think I just asked them, you know, how much are you paying for that to be done? And they told me, and I said, well, you know, I can do it for less than that. And I assume they just decided to, you know, give them a shot. So I think it started with just my grandparents and maybe their neighbors. And then a buddy of mine through high school, we ended up growing it to maybe, I don't know, 25 or 30 accounts. I don't know how big it was at its height. But yeah, it was sort of like a small thing that just started small when I was young and then sort of kept growing, and you actually make pretty good money if you're, you know, a high school student that just does it on weekends and in afternoons. So it was a turf war in your neighborhood, was it? Yeah, it ended up working out pretty well. I mean, we had a couple neighborhoods where we had pretty good penetration and we could, you know, had 6 or 7 yards in a strip, and it works out pretty well that way. So you know, I'm not going to spend all the time talking about this, but what were the old guys? The old guys who'd been doing the neighborhood for years and had their standard, you know, turn up, mow the lawn, get paid, and away they go. And then you're suddenly coming in and undercutting them. Was there sort of a bit of argy-bargy? Did you sort of get lawnmowers at dawn? Not quite. I mean, I think it was mostly just they had, way higher overhead than we had. And also they, these were adults that needed to make a lot more money, than we had to make. And so we were able to do it at a lower cost. And it was mostly like, friends, and then the friends would introduce us to their neighbors and, that kind of thing. And I think in retrospect, we probably could have grown it a lot bigger than we did, and probably could have made a lot more money than we did, in terms of hiring a lot of employees and then, selling it to a larger company. But I learned a lot of lessons, and it was definitely a good experience.
I actually used to go out washing cars myself, and I used to wait until the coldest, most miserable day, because you knew that every single person you knock on the door was going to say yes. Who wants to go out and wash cars when it's freezing cold? And you could make a fortune on it. But now I rarely see children in my neighbourhood doing anything like that. I don't know if that's the same in America, but there seems to be a fear of young kids going around neighbourhoods knocking on doors like I used to do in the 70s.
Yeah, it's definitely different. I grew up in Florida, so the lawn service, everything sort of like related to lawns and all that was in very, very high demand compared to other places, just because the grass was constantly growing and it was hot and people didn't want to be outside and all that. So I definitely had an advantage from that perspective.
So you grew up in Florida, the home of the mouse, and I imagine there must have been part of your time. Everyone I've spoken to seems to have either a relative or they have themselves worked in one of the theme parks. Were you goofy at the weekend?
I might be an exception to that rule. I don't think I even know anyone who has worked at Disney World. I can't think of anyone I know. That's weird now that I think about it, because it's such a high percentage of the total employment of that area. But yeah, I don't think I know anyone that's worked at Disney at all. That's the first time I thought about that.
Because I got told recently, and I can believe this, that all the characters... I might be ruining this. If any children are listening, please put your fingers in your ears now. But all the characters are actually women because they're smaller.
Huh. I didn't know that. I should brush up on my Disney trivia.
Yeah. So if you ever meet somebody who's really into Disney, then you're going to get in there big time because you know those kind of facts. It's a good way to pull. Okay, so you're in Florida. You haven't been involved in Disney World at all, but you go through Florida University. What were you studying at that time? Did you at that time have a career path planned out, or were you just going the standard route, which most of us do, of trying to find the education courses that kind of covered standard jobs?
Yeah, so I majored in economics at UF. I was always sort of interested in entrepreneurship and like starting random little side projects here and there, from a pretty early age, but then definitely through college was constantly doing that. Freshman year, I thought I wanted to do banking of some sort, either investment banking or some sort of similar path. And so I did an internship at a bank in Orlando, working in the small business sort of business loans department, and learned a lot from that experience. The main thing I learned was that I didn't want to do banking, and it wouldn't have been comparable to doing like an internship at Goldman. So it wasn't, exactly what I would have experienced, but it gave me a taste of the finance world, and that I didn't want to do that. So that sort of sent me back to the drawing board a little bit. And then I through that process, decided the next summer I wanted to do sort of the craziest thing that I could think of in terms of, what I wanted to spend my summer either interning or working. And that's when I went to Africa, as you mentioned. And that was sort of what I think spurred me along into realizing I wanted to sort of dive into the tech world and be more involved in the startups that were coming out of SF.
So what did your parents say? You come back and you say, look, I've been in banking, because most parents, I imagine at that age, want you to go into a job that they understand, and working in an office is something that the older generation naturally passed through themselves. So you're in that job, and then you suddenly say, Mum, Dad, can't stand this anymore, I want to go to Africa. Did they go, yes, go for it? Or was it, oh, hang on, Ryan, what are you doing? You've got a stable job there.
No, I think they were probably pretty, I don't know if they necessarily saw it coming, but I had probably pushed the boundaries, or at least the norms with, most of the things in my life, many times before that. So I don't know, I wouldn't say they expected it, but I would say I don't think they were surprised. I don't think it was like something that took them by surprise by any means. And I'm guessing by that point they had probably realized, even if I hadn't realized it, that I probably wasn't going to, just do like a traditional, like become an insurance salesman in Orlando or something. They had probably realized that that was not what I was going to do. And were probably anticipating, I don't know, I should probably ask them that, but I don't think they were anticipating me doing a sort of standard career path and probably doing something a little different.
That's interesting that you say that now you think about it, they probably knew that about you before you knew it yourself.
Yeah, I mean, they were always, so I was homeschooled through middle school, which is actually probably the entire reason why I'm anywhere close to where I am today, is because they allowed me the freedom to, and they recognized early on that there was a lot of things that I could do. There was a lot of things that it empowered me to do that I wouldn't have done if I was, at a standard like middle school or elementary school. Things like the lawn service, things like that I learned so much more from than I ever would have learned in the classroom. And so they were always like super supportive, and they were able to just basically allow me to, as much flexibility as they could, even through high school, to do the things that I wanted to do and to learn a lot of things the hard way, without them intervening or trying to, create a safe, environment around these sort of risky things that I was doing.
So is homeschooling, a common thing in the United States? Because it is not in the United Kingdom in any shape or form. I think most of us go through what we call comprehensives, where all the girls, all the boys get pushed into classes, 30 a class, and you come out the other end in 5 years' time. But you can actually separate yourself from the education system and be schooled at home.
Yeah, so I think it's definitely more common here. I think there's a certain stigma around homeschooling that isn't necessarily accurate in all cases. That certainly wasn't accurate in my case. I think it works really well for some people and probably works really horribly for a lot of other people. Like I have no idea if I would homeschool my kids, but for me it worked really well because I was pretty driven. I was pretty excited about what I was doing, and so it was a perfect fit for me. And we also did a hybrids thing. So when I went to a private high school, and it was totally, the transition wasn't difficult at all. Went to a big public university. It wasn't difficult at all. So for me, it was perfect. And like I said, it was probably the best possible thing that's happened to me so far in my life in terms of my own personal development and the things that I learned because of that. But I think for other people, and my mom was also just incredible at what she did. So she went to school and majored in education. Like she was amazing. So I think for a lot of other people that probably didn't have that, that sort of level of resources around them and that framework, it probably wouldn't work as well. But for me, it ended up working really well.
Is it not lonely though?
No, not at all. I had a core group of friends in my neighborhood. The guy that I started the lawn service with was a guy who was also homeschooled. And I probably had a better and tighter friend group than I would have. I would say I had a better and tighter friend group when I was in middle school and elementary school being homeschooled than I did, or at least comparable to, than I did in high school when I was going to a standard private school.
I can't imagine, I've got kids, and I can't imagine them paying attention to me if I was trying to teach them at home.
Yeah, I think it definitely, it depends on the family and depends on the kids and the personalities and all that kind of stuff. My parents did something different with each of us. I have two brothers and sisters, so it was they were very they like sort of looked at each of us, figured out the way that we learn, what styles worked for us, and it was by no means this thing where they were like, we're gonna, we're homeschooling all our kids, or we're homeschooling you through to college or whatever. Like it was very child by child basis, based on how we learned and what was best for us. And so each of us entered either private school or whatever at different times, and it was very much like from the perspective of the way that we learned each of our sort of like traits and habits and personalities and all that.
So you go through homeschooling and you then go through the education system, as you say, and you have this moment of, I don't like banking, which is very common. I did banking for 20 years and then I did insurance for about 10 years after that. So I can understand that totally. And were you actually kind of lost at that moment when you come out of it? Were you in that situation that so many people are, where they can tell you what they don't want to do because they've done it and didn't like it, more than I actually know what I want to do with my future?
I don't know if I would have. I don't think I felt that way necessarily because it was pretty early on. Like it was just after my freshman year, so I didn't feel like pressure to figure that out necessarily right then. But I mean, it was definitely sort of a back to the drawing board moment. But I had a lot of other things that I was really interested in and that I figured I could dive into. So it wasn't like a panic thing or me feeling like, oh, I need to figure this out right away. Because I think if it would have happened like junior year or after I graduated or something, then I definitely would feel that way. But I don't necessarily think it was as big of a deal just because it was still so early on and I was really young.
Because I think you are extremely lucky. If you don't realise this, and I'm sure you do because you seem a very well-rounded individual, but you are so lucky to find your passion, find your path so early on, because so many people don't. And so many people will float through job after job after job until they then have a family and then feel almost trapped of throwing it up in the air and trying something new because they have to support that family. So I think it's it's an enviable position that you found yourself in. But I know, because we're going to come to it, that you've got there through hard work and perseverance. But it's a good position to be in.
Sure, absolutely.
So you fly over to Africa and you get off the plane in Nairobi, was it?
Yeah.
Okay. Obviously, stupid question, culture shock, but was it so radical or did you kind of embrace it because it was so different?
No, I loved it. I mean, Nairobi's a great city. Kenya's a great country. There's, incredible community there. Super, super talented. I mean, it's a huge business city. It's, just like sort of any other major city in the world. But specifically in the tech world, there's a huge tech scene there. Super, super talented developers, designers, engineers, a bunch of cool startup founders. So it was definitely, it's not America, but like there's a lot of things that I don't like about America either. So there's, I was super excited to be there and it was a great experience. And I love the culture there. I love the city. I love the people there. It's absolutely an incredible place.
So why Nairobi? Why did you go there? Out of all the places on earth that you could have gone to, what drew you there?
So there's a guy, his name's Eric Hirschman. He's the founder of a company called Ushahidi, and also a founder of the iHub, which is the place that I worked in Nairobi. And most recently the co-founder of a company called Brick. And I knew him, we had some mutual friends in Orlando and sort of knew each other sort of like as acquaintances. And so he was the founder of this co-working space sort of tech community there called the iHub that had about 3,000 or 4,000 members at that time and was basically one of the tech hubs for all of Africa and sort of the hub of all the cool tech startups that were coming out of there. And so I just emailed him and said, hey, I want to come out there for the summer and help run the business side of this thing however I can. If it's working on the iHub, if it's working with individual entrepreneurs that are within the community, if it's startups that are there, whatever, I'm down for whatever. So was sort of just his like right-hand guy for the summer, essentially, just working on whatever projects he thought were most valuable. And yeah, I learned a ton from him. He totally took a chance on me and I'm super thankful for that. And he put me in a lot of opportunities that I was super uncomfortable with, but was forced to step up and just make things happen. And I feel like I did, and I learned a lot through those experiences.
Well, I was going to ask you that question, but you kind of already sort of led into it. He took a chance on you. Or what do you think he saw in the young Ryan Delk? Why did he sort of give you those opportunities?
I don't know. I should ask him that. He definitely put me through like a little bit of like some tests. I think he emailed me like a week or two before, maybe like a week before, or emailed me. Like I emailed him and he said, hey, okay, I'm going to be in Orlando. Do you want to meet at like 7 a.m. And Orlando is like 2.5 hours from where I was at school. You want to meet at like 7 a.m. at this coffee shop to chat or whatever. So there was some like, he put up some bars, and in retrospect, I saw what he was doing. He was sort of testing like, how bad do I want this? What type of person am I? And of course I said, yeah, let's do it. Like, see you there. And he hires basically on two things. He hires people that are smart and people that get things done. And I remember sending him my resume, and he was like, I'm not even going to open that attachment because the only person I've ever hired based on their resume is the only person I've ever fired. And I really liked that quote and that mentality because he much prefers just to talk to you and spend 30 or 45 minutes with you and figure out if you're smart and if you get things done. And if those two things are true, then from his perspective, you're going to succeed, at some role within what he's working on, and he can help you be successful. So that was sort of his metric, and I guess I qualified.
I think that's brilliant, though, isn't it? To actually sit down one-to-one and not look at the resume, because at the end of the day, and I've been saying this to people for years and years and years because I've been in corporate land, but it's not about what you've done. It's about what you can do. And in most companies, they're going to train you in what they want you to do. They just want you to be able to do it. And I've always said that a resume is kind of a waste of time, really. It's a paper chase, because, you list your responsibilities, you list what you've done over the last few years, but of course everyone's done those same things, because if you're working in a corporate land, you're going to get that. It's about mindset, isn't it? It's about integrity, it's about honesty, and you're only going to get that by actually having a conversation and thinking, I've got a connection with this person and I trust them.
Exactly.
What was it that he trusted about you, though, Ryan, in that coffee shop in Orlando at 7 o'clock in the morning? What
in terms of like responsibilities, or?
Yeah, because I am fascinated because, at that stage of your career, I wouldn't imagine, other than having a hustle muscle to get things going in your regards, the fact that you were willing to email this person and saying, I will do this, and the fact that you're willing to get there at 7 o'clock in the morning. But a lot of other people would do that same thing. So what do you reckon he saw in you that separated you from the other people that he was probably seeing at that time?
I don't know. I mean, we chatted about some ideas for the iHub. I had some questions for him, which I think in retrospect, like when I'm interviewing people, that's always a really, really good sign, is if they have good questions that are not available on the internet by, Googling something for you about your business or about what you're working on. So I think I had probably some good questions for him and some hopefully good ideas for things that I would work on. And then I'm pretty sure before that he probably reference checked me with mutual friends that we had and just asked, what they thought about me, or what, if I'd worked with them, like what was that like? So I think he probably reference checked me and went in with a little bit of a bias towards thinking it might work out. And then after the conversation, figured it was worth taking a chance on.
So as we sit here now, what skills have you got that other people in your environment, your peer group, haven't got? Because the avatar of the show is the people who want to change their life but are kind of frightened to take that first step. Do they need all the skills that you've got now, or is that something you can learn? Is there something tangible, something almost, about your personality that sets you apart and gets you to the position where you're on this show today?
I don't know. I mean, I don't think, I feel like I'm still learning a lot, and I think I have a long way to go, from like a job, like a role perspective, and learning how to build Gumroad and how to make Gumroad more successful. And also from a personal perspective, I've definitely been the benefit of a lot of people, taking time to either teach me things or invest in me, or like what Eric did and what a lot of other people have done, put me in situations where, I was uncomfortable or I felt like I was in over my head, and they, pushed me to succeed. And, those situations are definitely things that I learned, so much from in a very hyper condensed period, that I would have never learned otherwise. And so I think those types of situations and trying to get yourself into positions where you're in those situations is really important. And the other thing I looked for, particularly when I was thinking about like internships in college, is trying to work for the people that I wanted to be like in 5 or 10 years, and find those people, and then try to like work directly under them or directly with them. And that I think was like, that definitely informed my, wanting to work with Eric in Nairobi, and that, I learned a ton from him as a result. So I think, yeah, I mean, I don't know exactly how to answer that question, but that's probably, the biggest contributor so far.
Yeah, I think you've answered that fully. And the phrase that I picked up from that was you were very proactive about getting yourself in positions. You knew what you wanted and you found the angle to get it. So many people, I heard a stat where they say only 1% of the population who's ever been on the world have taken action or created something or invented something. And you seem to be somebody that is an action taker and will make things happen. And people might be listening now and going, yes, it's all right for him. But of course, you've joined up those dots. You've made those things occur in your life by taking the steps and the action that perhaps other people wouldn't have done.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely, that framework can definitely be super helpful, particularly if you're young and you're trying to figure out what you want to do with your life and where you want to be and how you want to create value for people.
Did you see yourself as a role model for sort of younger Ryan Delks coming up? Did you get people sort of emailing you, asking for your help and your assistance and your knowledge?
Yeah, I definitely get a lot of emails from people asking for help or insight. But I mean, I think that I have so far to go and have so much left to learn that I definitely try to share anything that I've learned. Most of it is from making mistakes and making stupid decisions that I learned from. And so if I can save people that time, then I definitely try to do it. And, there's things that have worked really well for us at Gumroad that I've learned that I definitely try to share, but I feel like there's so much for me to learn from almost everyone I talk to. Even people that call in, asking or call me or email me asking for advice, like I generally learn stuff from them as well. So, I'm trying to do the same thing that they're doing as well, perhaps just with different people or different circumstances.
Well, the theme of the show is about Steve Jobs' speech back in 2005 when he talks about not being able to see your future without, at that moment. It's only when you look back and you join up the dots. And I'm going to play that now because what you said there was a lot of stupid decisions that you made, but a lot of those stupid decisions were actually the ones that kind of put you in certain positions because you had to react to it and you had to operate in a different way to perhaps how you would have done if everything had gone your way.
Yeah.
So let's listen to Steve Jobs and see how relevant this is to you now.
Of course, it was impossible to connect the dots looking forward when I was in college, but it was very, very clear looking backwards 10 years later. Again, you can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backwards. So you have to trust that the dots will somehow connect in your future. You have to trust in something, your gut, destiny, life, karma, whatever. Because believing that the dots will connect down the road will give you the confidence to follow your heart, even when it leads you off the well-worn path. And that will make all the difference.
So you say you've made stupid decisions in the past, and I'm sure you're going to make stupid decisions in the future because that's how life is. You just sort of you do some really good things, you do some amazing things, and you do stuff that just doesn't hit the mark. Have you got more faith in yourself that those stupid decisions can be worked out to your benefit because you've already gone through that in the past and you've seen that? Do you have gut and intuition, like Steve was saying there, because even in your age at the moment, you can already look back and connect those dots?
Yeah, I definitely feel that way. I think, I see that both. I see the dots connecting for me both in positive things and negative things, both in times where, I took chances and was in a risky situation or put myself out there and it ended up paying off and in a big way, or in situations where, I didn't make good decisions or I took a risk and it failed or whatever, and then that led to something that I would have never gotten otherwise. So yeah, I definitely see that. I see the dots connecting, both catalyzed by poor decisions, but also, or not even poor decisions, but just poor, circumstances. And then also by, things that I took a chance on that ended up working out really well.
But those chances are the ones that normally have the big payoff, aren't they? They've got to.
Yeah, I think, I can talk more about this later in terms of the advice that I would give myself when I was younger, but I think risks always seem bigger than they are, at least up until a certain point. And, in retrospect, the things that felt like these huge deals and these really scary things, when I was 19, now, 4 years later, don't feel like they were that risky at all, or at least feel like very small risks. And I think probably the things that I feel like are super risky right now that I'm doing or choosing to do are, in 4 years, not going to feel like they were that big of risks. But I think the payoff can be, really, really high, particularly if you're taking risks that are calculated and that that you're putting yourself in a position to see success.
But there is a theme that runs through all these shows, and I mention it all the time. It's a daily show, so I have to sort of repeat myself quite often. And one of the things that a lot of people talk about is the leap of faith, and they reference the scene in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade when Harrison Ford has to take a leap of faith, and he steps off the cliff, and you expect him to plummet to his death, but he doesn't. He kind of lands on this bridge, and then he sort of walks across, and he gets hold of the Holy Grail. Do you remember that scene in that film?
I think so. It's been a while, but I'm pretty sure I know exactly what you're talking about.
Now, most of the guests are saying that they've all had those leaps of faith where they wasn't sure that it was going to pan out, but they just knew that it was something that they had to do. Is that a calculated risk? I don't know, because they didn't really know that there was going to be a positive response to it. Is there any in your life that you could go, yes, that was my absolute leap of faith? And yes, it's panned out because you're here talking to us today. But at that one moment, you were more scared than any other time in your life up to that point.
Yeah, I think. I think that risk can be calculated even when you don't know the outcome. I view like a calculated risk as something where you're thinking about, okay, there's a risk here, but it's the potential upside is much higher than the potential downside. Which is sort of hopefully why you make any decision in your life. But for me, that was a lot of how I viewed it, where, there's certainly a risk, there's certainly a potential, negative here, but that's, very heavily outweighed by the potential upside or what could come of this. So yeah, I think, going to Africa was definitely a risk. It was something that there was a lot of uncertainty around. But I definitely, absolutely 100% would not have the opportunities that I had after that if I hadn't gone, if I had done, a different internship or worked somewhere else or whatever. So there's definitely things, I've seen it pay off, in situations like that pretty heavily. And, the risk wasn't massive. The biggest risk was that I would go there and, not create any value for a summer and, they would say, hey, you didn't do a very good job or whatever. That's not actually that big of a risk in retrospect if spending 3 months of your life, but that felt like a really big risk at that point, and but the payoff was very, very high.
It's the internal conflict, isn't it? Everyone has those voices, but the voices, they allow them to control them, and other people can just silence them. But no matter who you are, no matter where you are, no matter what level, what salary, whatever, we all have those voices. It's a human element that we have to overcome.
Yeah, absolutely.
Did you ever have those voices when you can't overcome them, Ryan? You seem supremely confident, but do you ever have those moments when you sort of lay in bed, almost stomach churning constantly because you think, oh, this is too much for me to deal with at the moment?
Yeah, definitely. I do try to be confident, but I'm also, I definitely question myself a lot. I think everyone has a lot of insecurity that we don't let out or don't talk about, but I think that everyone has that, and that it's important to, to talk about that, because it's something that everyone deals with, no matter how confident they seem on the outside. And I actually have a theory that people that seem confident are the most insecure, because I feel like it's true with me, and I think that it's probably true with a lot of other people. But yeah, there's moments all the time. I think anytime that you are, really, really deeply, whenever you really deeply care about something, whether it's a company you're working on or someone something you're building something for, or an opportunity you want to get, if you're really emotionally invested in that at a deep level, there's, you're going to feel that sort of like stomach churning, not being able to sleep, either, nervous about how something's going to work out or frustrated about a decision that you made. I can definitely identify that both at Gumroad and, in stuff I've worked on in the past.
And now at Gumroad, as I said in the introduction, you must be meeting celebrities, artists trying to get their work out. And these are the people that you would imagine are supremely confident because they have to get up on stage, they have to sing, they have to put themselves out there. Have you met anyone, without giving any names, I'm not interested in names, but have you met any celebrities that you have been really surprised that their public persona was not the person that you were meeting?
Yeah, I think there's very few people that the persona that you see on TV or in interviews or whatever. There's very few people where that lines up closely with who they are as a person, and sometimes that's completely intentional. Because it becomes, after a certain point, it becomes easier just to have sort of an alter ego of sorts that you use in the public that is very calculated and very controlled and safe. And then you have sort of who you really are. I think there's a few people that definitely, are sort of just who they are all the time. And I don't think it's a bad thing at all to have, two separate sort of, at least two separate sort of personalities or the way that you handle things. Because I think that, it's actually really, really tough being in their shoes. And there's, a lot of negatives that go with that life. And I think a lot of times, they're also, there's a lot of people who are really insecure. They're very, very good. I think we're all we have things that we're really, really good at, that we come across as very confident in, and we're very, calculated and under control in that environment. But then, there's other environments where we feel like a fish out of water and we have no idea what to do. And I think that's true about everyone, regardless of, I think you can sort of maximize the amount of, situations where you are confident and where you feel like you have, a really, really good, handle on things. But I think there's always going to be those that, you don't feel like you're in your core competencies.
Yeah, well, or your unique self. You find that confidence because you're playing to the strengths which are inherently yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
So if I took you, Ryan, now, and I said to you, and I asked this question with lots of people, I'm quite interested in this, and I said to you, okay, I'd like you to stand in front of a boardroom of 60 people and do a presentation for 45 minutes on a subject you know very well. Would you be able to do it?
Yeah, absolutely.
If I said to you, I want you to sing it in front of them for 45 minutes, would you be able to do it?
I wouldn't like it, but I definitely had a small little side music career that I wanted to take off in college. So I definitely could do it if I needed to, but probably wouldn't be my ideal situation.
So Ryan Delk with a sort of rock star mullet, was it back in the day?
The day was only really 3 or 4 years ago, so the mullet wasn't quite the.
Sorry, I'm making myself seem old then. Yeah.
But
I've been through the mullet. I'm still kind of in the mullet, really. I'm not sure what's happening there.
Nice.
So what instrument did you play, or was it singing? Was it what did you do?
It was a little bit of everything. Mostly guitar was sort of the main thing, but.
So who did you base yourself on? If I said to you, what kind of artist in your head when you was doing your stuff, who did you think you were?
The artist, the frontman that I really liked would be, I think Brandon Flowers from The Killers is one of the best frontmen in music. Chris Martin from Coldplay. So probably a lot of the sort of go-to cliche ones were probably my favorite.
I'd like to see that. I'd like to see the Ryan Delk album, because in Gumroad you could make an album and you could put it straight into their hands.
Yes, I've thought about putting out some of the old stuff. Maybe I'll do it one day. I had some friends that I collaborated on a couple little projects, so it'd be fun to put those out there sometime.
So in your role with Gumroad, what do you do on a daily basis then? Because this is a new concept to me, and when I started reading about it, I thought to myself, well, this is kind of genius that artists can make the album, stay in total control of it, it seemed to me, and then almost get paid for it before they make it by their fans and then give it to the fans. Is that, am I right on that, or is that a sort of simple view of it?
No, I think that's sort of the foundation of the whole model, is that the economics of creativity right now are broken, and in order for, basically, most creators don't get fairly compensated for their work. And they have an audience and they're not able to make a living off that audience. in most cases, and they have to have a second job or, a primary job, and they make their art or their work on the side. And then the ones that have a big audience, they see a very, very small percentage of the fruits of their labor actually ending up in their pocket. And I'm not one that, there's a lot of people that say like, artists should just be entrepreneurs and they should just have their, they should just be able to run everything themselves. And, once you take a closer look at the music industry and, the film industry and all these different industries, you realize like everyone most people along the value chain are actually adding a lot of value, and they're taking a cut from the revenue for that value. But a lot of it is very necessary. Managers add a lot of value to an artist's career. There's a lot of roles that could be said for, but for us, we're trying to, empower those people that are in those roles and working with the artists or the filmmakers or whoever it is, to be able to get the most amount of revenue from their work and not have to deal with, a commerce platform or a marketplace that takes 30% or 40% or 50%, or more of the revenue from a project.
So was there an artist that kicked this off, or was it Gumroad kicking off? Was this an idea that had been floating around for a while, but you've kind of realized it in your company?
There's artists that have tried this before, with various tools, whether it's, authors or filmmakers or, direct distribution was definitely a thing before Gumroad existed. And Saho, who's the founder of Gumroad and whose brainchild this is, he actually, started it not for any piece of music or film or a book, but for a Photoshop icon that he had designed, that he, spent a lot of time on, ended up not using, and thought, hey, there's probably people on Twitter who would want to buy this, and it would save them a lot of time if they could just buy this pencil icon. And so, he ended up basically just hacking this thing together so that he could sell this pencil icon to his followers on Twitter, and then realized the potential of it, for all types of creators, and began to scale it from there.
It's one of those ideas, isn't it? As soon as you hear it, you think, God, I should have had that idea. That it just seems so perfect in so many formats. And even with my narrow-minded entrepreneurial brain, which generally will trigger into excitement when I've seen somebody already do something, you kind of look at this and you can see every avenue that you could go through. This is like life-changing for so many people, even though it's a company. But until a couple of days ago, when you confirmed you'd be on the show and I started sort of doing some investigation on you, I'd never heard of in any shape or form.
Yeah, part of it is the blessing and the curse of the type of platform we're trying to build. And we're not a consumer-facing, it's not like a marketplace that people go to Gumroad.com and download all their favorite stuff. Our model is that we give the power of distribution to the creators themselves. So, ideally when you go and buy something from a creator, it feels like you're just buying it from them. It doesn't feel like you're buying it from Gumroad. And, as we've scaled, like we started to build, a bit of a consumer facing brand where people see the payment flow and they say, okay, I realize this is Gumroad. That's awesome. But for the most part, we want it to feel like you're just buying it directly from that creator. And, because of that, we're not like a consumer facing marketplace. In any way, shape, or form.
Are you excited by it all?
Yeah, I'm absolutely pumped. The reason why I think the world will be a better place if something like Gumroad scales, in a big way, and Gumroad becomes, if Gumroad becomes the primary way that a lot of creators are distributing their content, the world is going to be a better place because they're going to be making more money off what they make. They're going to be able to make more art that everyone loves. Consumers and fans are going to have more direct access to that content. There's not going to be as many barriers up to getting the content. And then people will be able to do what they love. We have so many people that have so many stories of people that have, were working a job and sort of whether it was writing books or doing films or recording music at night. And then they were selling it through the traditional means and not making much money. And then they realized, hey, I can sort of build an audience, own my audience, sell directly to them, get all the data from the transactions, learn from that, and sort of repeat that process. And I can make as much or in some cases much, much more money than I was making at my full-time job. And those stories are the things that we want to scale, not from a couple hundred or a couple thousand of creators, but we want to have hundreds of thousands and millions of creators that have that same story, and that are able then to do what they love, and that their audience is just thrilled by it because they get more art and content that they enjoy.
I think that's one side of it, and the other side, I feel, is that the artists have got the ability to grow, and they're not like the artists that you see through American Idol and X Factor, as it is over here, where they will release a single, and if it doesn't do very well, they might get a chance of another single, and then that's it, they've gone forever. By people actually sort of self-publicising and creating their own work, they can actually grow, and they can make live mistakes, can't they? And do a great album, and then the next one may not be as good, but not like the record company just dropping them. They can actually develop, and they can learn from their mistakes and keep on joining up the dots in their own sort of creative career.
Yeah, I mean, the idea and the opportunities that come from owning your audience are very powerful. I mean, when you have, the email addresses of your fans and are able to see, hey, here's where my fans are coming from, here's where they're purchasing from, here's the platforms that they're engaging with me on. It's really, really powerful because you can make a lot of decisions based on that. Almost everyone who uses Gumroad has, product launches or releases content that doesn't do as well as other content they've released. And, you learn from that, and then you move on to the next one, and you still have, an audience there that you can distribute things to, and that, is excited about getting your work. And the idea of owning that whole process and really owning your audience, and not just, sort of viewing it as one of many marketing channels that you can sort of shoot things out to, but really an audience that you own and that you're cultivating and that you're engaging with, is really empowering. And it allows you to, make mistakes and, sort of more sustainably, grow your career, grow the money that you're making, the revenue, all that type of stuff.
Well, I love the fact that you are pumped, as you say. So every day you must love coming into work. You must love that you're creating something, and you are an integral part of it, because you are really the avatar of the show. You are the kind of people that I'm trying to reach out and say, you can have a kick-ass life. You can really do stuff. And you've just got to overcome those fears. You've got to start. You've got to challenge the status quo to be able to have all that. And you seem to me as the sort of the poster boy of what I'm trying to achieve. So, I salute you. Credit to you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
So bringing us to the end, Ryan, just so that I can let you go off and have more celebrity lunches with people. This is the bit that we call the sermon on the mic. And this is a bit when I play a little bit of music, and I then step away from the mic and let you go back in time and give advice to your younger self. And it can be any age of younger self. But what kind of words would you say to that person? And to be honest, they're not going to be that much younger than you are now. But I'm going to play the music. I'm going to go quiet. And this is the sermon on the mic.
Here we go with the best bit of the show. The sermon on the mic. The sermon on the mic.
Yeah. So if I was talking to a younger version of myself, I've been thinking about this for a couple hours now, thinking about what I would say. And I think that the two things that I would say is, one, I mentioned it earlier, but I think that the risks that seemed very big, or that can seem very big in the moment, in retrospect, often are much smaller than you see, or feel much smaller in retrospect. And that manifests itself in a lot of different ways, but the most important way, I think, is that the failures that could happen from taking those risks are actually much smaller. There's been moments within Gumroad, within when I was in college, within internships that I had, where I felt like I had made the most catastrophic mistake, something that was going to impact the company in some massive way or whatever. And what you realize is that there's actually very few mistakes that you make that have any sort of lasting, implications. And there certainly are those that do and that are, very bad. But the sort of like everyday mistakes that a lot of people make, really don't have a lasting impact. And they're actually pretty easy to spring back from. And, as you move forward and as you learn from them, they can actually be the things that catalyze a lot of growth and a lot of future opportunities. And the other thing I would say is, I think it's really difficult when you're young to play the long game, and it's easy to feel like you need to be accomplishing more, you need to be farther along, or you need to optimize your life for sort of short-term either goals or happiness or whatever. But you realize that, and I'm still realizing this, that the people that you admire and the people you look up to, often they've been doing the things that they're doing for 10, 20, 30 years sometimes. And that's a very, very long arc, of time that you can make mistakes in, that you can learn from, that you can grow from. And if you play the long game and you're, those people that you admire, if you want to be in their shoes, and realize that you have a lot of time to accomplish that, it can help you, I think, make decisions that are going to be better for you long term. And it might mean, not taking as many opportunities that are going to, whatever it is, give you more notoriety or more wealth or whatever in the short term, for things that are investing more in your future and the long-term goals that you have. And so, yeah, those are probably the two pieces of advice that I would give my younger self if I could.
And I think they are two pieces of advice that everyone should take on board. Certainly, I'm taking those on board because I think I'm still learning. And Ryan, it's been a learning curve for me tonight because you are so focused. You're so tunnel vision, but you're doing it in the right way, and you come across as a lovely bloke. And I really wish you all the best. And as I say to all the guests, if you ever have anything that you want to share again, please come back on, because your history is going to continue to keep on growing, and we'll have more opportunities of looking back and joining up those dots. And by joining up those dots, it's the best way to build our future. Ryan Delk, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me, David.
David doesn't want you to become a faded version of the brilliant self you were once to become. So he's put together an amazing guide for you called the 8 Pieces of Advice That Every Successful Entrepreneur Practices, including the 2 that changed his life. Head over to joinupdots.com to download this amazing guide for free, and we'll see you tomorrow on Join Up Dots.